I just don't want to forget to record.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Fool's Journey, Archetypal Pathways on the Road to Individuation. This is April Fool's Day, and it is 5:30 Pacific time. And here, that's just so we can locate ourselves in time, because we will be doing a little bit of movement through time and space. So I'm going to just ring us in and begin. So welcome, everyone. Again, this is the Fool's Journey, and it's an overview of the journey that the archetypal fool, the tarot, makes, coming back home to the journey leading back to wholeness. So to begin, I'm going to take us through, whoops, we are not on, there we go. I'm going to take us through a meditation, beautiful meditation by Stephen Huller from his book, The Fool's Pilgrimage, Meditations on the Tarot. And this is a portion of that. I recognize myself as an essence without form, without qualities and limitations. I am all in all. I am no thing, but I am present in all things. I am the terminal of all and the first ordination of beginning. I was and was not. I am and am not. I shall be, yet I am utterly without a future. I am circle with its center everywhere and its circumference nowhere. Childlike and ancient, young and old, new and aged am I. I am all, and the not. I am free. So I am, and was, and shall be, without being and in non-being, within time and out of time, ever and never. So that's the beginning. We are having a little bit of trouble moving forward here. Let's see if this works. That's very interesting. Jeremy, I have to escape in order to move forward. So, which is an interesting April Fool's trick. So everyone, I'm going to just go over some of these rich material and the slides for about an hour until we're through it, and then I will open it up to questions. If we get through sooner, I will certainly open it up to questions sooner. I'm trying to figure. So it begins with, this is a quote from William Blake, "If the fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise." So the fool is an image of who we all are, the innocent, the beginner's mind, the one who makes the journey, the trickster in some cases. So again, I'm not able to move forward. This is quite interesting. Okay, we're having a little bit of a technological glitch here for some reason.
There it goes.
There we go. So it's the mouse pad. So typical of the fool and typical of all of us when we are young, fools rush in where angels fear to tread, as Alexander Pope noted. Fortunately, we don't know where we're going when we begin our journey, or we might not take that step. And as we noted, let's go back for a moment to the image of the fool, who's actually behind me. I don't know if you can see me. He's about to step off a precipice. He's very optimistic. He has his little white dog, perhaps representing his instinct to remind him to pay attention to where he's going. He doesn't seem to be paying attention, however. The sun is shining on him. He has a small pack, not much, and the white rose for purity and innocence. Now, in the tarot, we notice a couple of things that are significant. One is that his sleeves seem to be the image of fire. And fire is an image in tarot that speaks of the beginning, of the first spark. So he's carrying the fire of life, and he is also carrying the wheels on his shirt, which might intimate the wheels of fortune. And he's about to begin his journey. Note that his number is 0, and we will come back to this. So this is a quote by Tolkien. "The road goes ever on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet until it joins some larger way where many paths and errands meet. And whither then, I cannot say." And this is a very appropriate beginning to the Fool's Journey. Jung says the soul demands your folly, not your wisdom, pointing to the fact that it is in that foolishness that we ask the question. So some tarot elements here. The tarot structure and content is a symbolic depiction that is a reflection of the universal and the personal experience. What's interesting here is that it originates from an oral and pictorial tradition. Just as the language of the dream is a language of image and symbol and metaphor, we find because the tarot is a symbol system of images, our psyche then is able to work with it in a much more direct way than we do with words. I've been working with the images now for several days intensely, and I find that when I do that, you may notice I'm kind of grasping for words until I shift gears into it. So the divination is a prayer for guidance to the gods. And the 78 cards, which is a full tarot deck, includes the minor arcana, which corresponds to air, fire, earth, and water, and also corresponds perhaps to Jung's 4 personality types. And I think there's some music in the background. I don't know.
I'm gonna mute them for you. If you guys are just getting logged in, please go ahead and mute your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. So there are the 78 cards and the major arcana of 56. And we would use the entire deck if we're looking into information, inviting or entreating the gods to speak to us. But in this case, we're using the major arcana, of which there are 22 cards, and they depict the paths that the soul takes towards wholeness, or what Jung called individuation. And the major arcana functions by itself as a meditative and a reflective tool, and it allows the psyche to function as a bridge. And the psyche is a bridge between the spirit and matter, between the collective world and the personal world. So this is a quote by Jung. "If one wants to form a picture of the symbolic process, the series of pictures found in alchemy, which we'll be talking about as we move forward, also seems as if the set of pictures in the tarot cards were distantly descended from the archetypes of transformation. The symbolic process is an experience in images and of images. as we were just saying. Its development usually shows in an enantiodromia structure, like the text of the I Ching, and so presents a rhythm of negative and positive, loss and gain, dark and light. So we're moving back and forth between the two. And the enantiodromia, as Jung speaks of it, is the definition of it when we have gone on the path as far to one extreme of dark or light, for example, as you can possibly go, nature will begin to swing it back in the other direction. And so the enantiodromia shows the path, which is a spiral path moving back and forth. So what is the Tarot? Is it a journey of self-discovery and understanding that leads to wisdom? Is it where the collective meets the personal? The Tarot's meaning and purpose in the 21st century, which is something I'd like to talk about right here for a moment, because I think it's relevant. We live in a time of polarities, of quickening, of enormous transition, and a word which denotes betwixt and between, change, metamorphosis. All of these are experiences that we encounter now on a daily basis through what's going on our planet, and moment to moment changes. We are caught right now between the past and the future, and the present is so destabilizing and terrifying to so many of us that we don't know who we are. And if we have not looked inside, we don't know who we are becoming. We are all becoming, however. Our minds are reorganizing themselves into new patterns as we live with technology and interact with it. And technology, as the internet, is indeed an alchemical thing, made of idea, electrical impulse. It is fluid, and it is matter. It is air, and it is fire, and it's about transformation. So looking at the Tarot, we see images of the gods and of ourselves and how we commune with the gods once again. This is a return to a sacred art and what Jung called the work of individuation, and what the occultists call the artless art, the sacred in matter, beginning with the unconscious matter, the dark matter or primal matter, prima materia as the alchemists called it, that which is dross, black, heavy matter. We are on a journey to turn it into something of great value, the philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, which is even beyond gold, although gold is a symbol of that incorruptible, pure substance of great value. Jung discovered this great mystery, and the secret to understanding the psyche was in unfolding through an analogous series of alchemical operations the nature of the psyche, and thus bringing to light, illuminating it. When we shine a light in the darkness, we uncover all kinds of things that we may not have wanted to see, which have been in shadow, lurking under the water, and then and only then can we begin to see what we are looking at, and only through reflection, self-reflection on polarities or opposites and the unconscious and the conscious, can we then elevate them to what Jung called the third or the transcendent function. So we're going to move forward here. One of the other important things here is Jung spoke a lot about amplification and synchronicity. And the Tarot is a tool that uses both of them.
Well, I do too. Yeah, I
so he actually is interested in that.
Yeah, well, this is
so we are not, by focusing and meditating on these images, we are not only amplifying images that are already in the unconscious, in the psyche, the imaginal realm. We also, in the divination process, are creating a synchronicity, because what is happening in our external life is then reflected coming through the cards. Now, it isn't the cards that hold the magic. It's the person, it's the diviner, the person who's reading the cards that holds the magic. Because we are ourselves, the Fool. We are the bridge between the worlds, between the unconscious spirit world and the world of the matter. We are soul. We are psyche. So, as moving forward, we're going to be looking at the archetypal depiction of the initiatory stages of life, which I'm sure we will recognize. And is it a game of chance, or is it a guide to fate or destiny? So here are some more faces. There's 3 different decks here. I added the one on the left because I really like that here the Fool is a juggler. What he's juggling is the astrological symbols, and that's appropriate. And the middle Fool is the traditional Rider-Waite deck, and the Fool on the right is the one from the Thoth deck, the Crowley deck. And as you can see, this is not quite such an innocent Fool. He's much more connected to Pan. He's within the spiral umbilical cord. He is falling into nature. So there's an element of this that can be connected to the Garden of Eden and falling into nature. And we can see beneath him there's an alligator, that wild and tense. He's being bitten by the tiger. But there's also elements of earth, such as the discs, the earth element. He's got the earth, the fire, the air, the water. So moving forward, the term, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end. The Fool's number, as you may have noted, is 0. And 0 is a symbol that intimates, or actually more than intimates, is the symbol for spirit. It has no center. It is infinite. So therefore, it is the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end, a symbol that is one for infinity. Individuation, Jung's term, is this realization of a whole, that is a self, for which he says all life is bound to individual carriers who realize it. By bringing the unconscious consciousness, every carrier is charged with an individual destiny and destination, and the realization of this alone makes sense of life in a meaningless time. So here's the Fool. And he is the one who wears all the masks. He is the one who makes the journey. And he is also the soul itself. So this is a lovely image of him both as juggler and joker and trickster. So here are all the 22 images. These are from the Rider-Waite deck. And these are places on the journey of initiation, and you will recognize many of them. I'm not sure if I can, I have a pointer. From the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, and the Empress. Some of these are very recognizable for us on our journeys. This upside down hanged man is a place of reversal when we're in that transition place where nothing makes sense and we've lost ourselves and don't know where we're going. This card is actually the card for temperance, but in the Thoth deck, it's actually called art because it's the card for alchemy. And you can see the triangle, which is the tension of the opposites and the third. Here we have this wonderful image of the hermit, holding the light, the 6-pointed star, where we go when we have to go into the depths in order to refocus. Death, which is really a card for transformation. The Devil, which might be a place we get stuck when we're caught in too much focus on the material, or we think we're stuck. There's a wonderful, and I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but in Hebrew, the devil card, which is so scary to so many people, is actually associated with the word mirth. In other words, laughter will dispel it. But there's more here. The tower, that is the end of the ego. It's a familiar one when everything crashes, everything we knew crashes. And a series finally arriving at the anima mundi, the world soul, and this is where the fool is headed. So who am I? Wisdom begins with the knowledge that we do not know, and that is the fool's journey. And therefore, the question of not knowing is the key. So we've already talked about symbol, a symbol deriving as much from the conscious as from the unconscious. The psyche understands through image and symbol. And through symbol is a metaphoric bridge. It's the way that we, and it's related culturally, depending on which culture we're looking at symbols through, but the universal is illuminated through symbols. And it also is able to reconcile them. As Jung says here, their conceptual polarity through form and their emotional polarity through its numinosity. So what is numinosity? Numinosity is that experience when the archetypal takes a hold. And we will get more into archetype, but it's a full body experience. It's spiritual, emotional, physical. And it's a beckoning. It's the voice of the spirit coming through us. And in moments of numinosity, we have heard the voice of what we call God and are given direction. So the numinous is something that is, again, intimated or pointed to by Tarot. In itself, it's an experience. Archetype, and this is just something I thought would be important to remember, is illuminates that which we know, but don't know. So in other words, on the soul level, the essence level, we know it. But on the conscious level, we may not know it, so we get hit by it sideways oftentimes. So there's more here on archetype, which I thought was really important in speaking about Tarot. Jung talks about archetypes as primordial images. And as of a biologist's patterns of behavior. So it's inborn, it's both instinctual and it's also archetypal, it's also universal. So we don't need to get too much into this at this moment. It's a little more intellectual and heady, but it's important to know that the myths and the fairy tales, the dreams, all of these speak to us, and that's why Tarot is still so popular, and there are thousands of decks now, because they dazzle, they invite, and they inspire us. And they are numinous. They arouse deep and intense affect from the unconscious, and they're formless, and they come into form through image and symbol. And they resemble instincts, which are of the body, and in that they cannot be recognized until they manifest in intention or action. As when we fall in love, when we are really angry, and we don't know where it came from, when we feel intense ecstasy, and on and on. So the term synchronicity is defined by Jung, is an acausal connection of psychological and physical phenomena appearing in reality as in a meaningful coincidence. Now that's a mouthful. So basically all it really means is that, again, it's the collision, in a sense, of something happening in the outer world at the same time, or very close to in time and space, to what is happening in the internal world. So it's a meaningful coincidence is a much simpler way to describe it. So we talked about amplification in Jungian analysis, looking at symbols throughout culture that involve universal symbols, fairy tales, mythologies that we may not be conscious of. So the tarot is a tool to amplify the universal, the archetypal field, and see it. And we talked about how synchronicity then, as we know, when we're using the tarot as in its divining aspect, of course, gives us information about where we are in time and space. So Jung says when images of the collective unconscious appear, one must extend and reinforce their meaning by all the conscious means at our disposal. And dreams, of course, are the most direct of those, but tarot is one that is also always there at our disposal when the dream world is not speaking to us. So here is one way and one perspective on how to see the layers of the journey, which in this brief introduction, we're not going to have time to go into each of the cards because it's an overview. But we can see that Fool, who is 0, is the one making the journey. And there are 3 levels of initiation depicted here, and they are very linear, but we'll go into other ways of perceiving it. As you can see on the left, over here, where the arrow is pointing, is the magician. And the magician, number 1, he has this lovely symbol for eternity over his head, as does the strength card right below him. So you'll see similarities. Again, this is the Rider-Waite deck, which is the most common deck, and it's a very complete deck. And very lovely, very medieval. So the Fool is wearing the mask here of the magician and all of the other figures as he moves through his journey to arrive at wholeness, spirit in matter, the anima mundi. So here the magician is very important because he has all 4 elements at his disposal, and he is the symbol for Hermes, Mercurius, and thought. The high priestess is the one who carries the knowledge of life. She's the one who moves across the desert carrying the water of life. She is the high priestess. She is not manifest. She is number 2. Number 3, we begin to see the Venus-ruled Great Mother, and here she is manifest. She's surrounded by nature. So she is an intimation of what is to come in the world. The Emperor is number 4, 4 being a very important number for Jung and its completion, and this is the Great Father. The Hierophant is a connector, a bridge between the worlds. So he's seen here as the Pope, but that's just a very Judeo-Christian view. He can be any connector between the worlds. And the Lovers is about balance, about choosing between the different levels of love. And here we have the Chariot at the end of the first initiation, bringing the will, the personal will, in alignment with the soul's will. And so this is a beginning, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but for the sake of time, perhaps we can come back to them. But we can see many phases here that will resonate potentially. So this is just very specifically showing that same thing. Now here's a very, very important point here. As above, so below, which in the ancient Hermes Trismegistus, who is the father of alchemy, and the above, so below, we're all familiar with, connects the universal, the archetypal world with what is below. But we have here the opposites, the tension of the opposites that Jung spoke of, and the transcendent third. So therefore, between these tension of the opposites, between holding dark and light, good and evil, sickness and health, whatever the opposites are, we must, in order to come to consciousness, balance these, juggle them, balance them, dance through them to arrive at what Jung called the transcendent third. So here are a couple of definitions that are pulled. Jung says, as I see it, as a three-dimensional world in time and space is like a system of coordinates. It may appear in time, space timelessness is a primordial image with many aspects. So it's connected to nature in three-dimensional world. The tendencies of the unconscious and the conscious are two factors that all together make up the transcendent function. And this is the transcendent function right here at the top. It's called the transcendent because it makes the transition from one attitude, which is over here, to another organically possible, which is up here. So here we bring a different view, and one that is the one that I've been studying for many years and is depthlessly, it has incredible depth, and it's a way of looking at the cards on the tree of life. This is the Hermetic tree of life. It does emerge from the Hebrew Kabbalah. We don't know how ancient it is. It is perhaps goes back to Egyptian times. It's very old. What's interesting is that in the middle of the 1800s, when the occultists started specifically started to study this, they discovered that in using these playing cards, which we're not quite sure where they came from, some people say they came from the Egyptians or the Gypsies, we don't know. But they appeared in the medieval times, and they are a pictorial story of a way to work with the paths of initiation. So these spheres on the tree of life represent God energies, astrological planets in some case, and the cards fit perfectly. And there happen to be 22 cards, which is an interesting synchronicity because there are 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Now, whether that was originally the case, we don't really know, but the correspondence is extraordinary and synchronistic. And correspondences are the way that we play with tarot. So I did an enlargement here just so we could recognize some of these. So here we have the Fool at the very top, and he's moving between wisdom, which is a place of the Shekinah, the Sophia, to the first spark of life. And here we have going from understanding, which is the other side of Sophia, wisdom and understanding, connecting through the magician who has the tools to be able to bring them into manifestation. And here it is crossed by the Empress, who is the Great Mother, and she bridges these two. And then there's another bridge that goes down the center, and here we have the High Priestess who carries the water of life across the desert, and she is the keeper of knowledge. So that's just in a nutshell. And here we see the Fool on the Tree of Life. The colors are very significant. They appear in the cards. They are purposeful. The yellow here is definitely, this is the sphere of individuation, of the soul, of the divine child. And we can see that the Fool is connected to this. The bottom here on the tree, where there are 4 elements and the colors are darker, earth tones, we see these same primal colors that have now are denser in matter. And so the Fool's Journey is bringing spirit into matter in the end, from heaven to earth, and then, of course, back again. So here we see on the Tree of Life, there are two paths. The one coming from the top is called the lightning path, which is that spark when we're illuminated, and it's very powerful. It's a numinous experience. The one on the right, the serpent path, is a path where we wind around. It's the path of Kundalini. It's also DNA. And it's the winding path from earth. And as you can see, it is actually called the serpent path. And here's Jung's version of the serpent path. And you can see clearly Jung working with this same energy. Another interesting thing is that if you look at the tree itself from the top down or the bottom up, it's a spiral journey. So let's take a look. I can't quite read this because it's too high up. Whoops. I just exited here. Let's see. So I can't read what I wrote here, but here it is. I don't know if you can see this. The self is not only the center, but also the circumference. The self is on the outside, but also at the very, very core, which embraces both the conscious and the unconscious. It's the center or the totality, just as the ego is the center of consciousness. And we'll come back to that. We'll talk more about that. But I just love this image, so I had to add it in because it incorporates the way, the twisting, turning serpent path, and it's very feminine. I am now. So here we have the Thoth deck again. I seem to go in and out here. The Fool on the Thoth deck. The one falling into matter, and you can see the spiral journey very clearly on this one.
Can you hit play again for us, Eva?
Yes, I can see that. That's an.
Try using the arrow keys. It helps. I don't know if you're trying to use the mouse.
Yeah, I was. Let's see. You see the arrow? Oh, it's working now. They weren't working earlier.
There we go. Awesome.
Okay. Great. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here we see in beautiful display each of the layers of initiation on the way down the tree. Now, when we get to the bottom, we just come back up again. So but here we see each of those cards, and we can. There's some, okay. So I'm going to just move through these, and we can come back to them when there are questions. We can just take a moment and sit with these. Now here's the Thoth Tarot. It's a different view. These cards were painted by Lady Frida Harris in the 1930s, and they're the ones I tend to use. They're particularly beautiful, but they're also very complete because they include the astrological symbolism, and they include symbolism from different cultures. For instance, you can see the card that we were looking at, the Chariot. Here it's very clear that it's related to the sign of Cancer and the personal will. And here we have this one, which is called Temperance, and it's very clearly a card where of alchemy, where we're mixing different elements to create a third transformational something of transformation. Something about the death card, which is interesting in all the decks, is that it isn't a card of death, because there is no death. You can't kill energy. It's a card where there's a lot of renewal coming up from the earth in some of the decks. This, of course, the Hangman. We can see here that he is hanging from the Ankh, another symbol of eternal life. And here we have Cerberus, the three-headed dog on this card. Of course, the Wheel of Fortune, we all recognize that. He did reverse these two cards. There's a lot of discussion as to whether this is accurate. This particular card, which he calls Lust, which is the card for strength in the traditional, is a mastery of over dense matter. So there's alchemy, and the tree is very prevalent in all of these cards. So I particularly love these cards. And here's Adjustment, which is a card for Libra. It's Balance. This, by the way, is a card for Leo. And moving forward, I didn't do that. That actually happened by itself. So here we see the Magician again. And I'd like to focus a little more on the Magician. On the left in the Thoth deck, we see the Magician as Hermes, Mercurius, and Thoth, who's the Egyptian, it's the Egyptian name for that same god of communication. This Mercurius is also the bridge, the mediator between spirit and matter, and thereby brings soul. He is the dream messenger, the traveler, the trickster, and we see he is juggling the four elements here and wearing the winged feet. The card on the right is the Rider-Waite deck, and you can see similarly, but it doesn't have that movement that the Thoth deck has. The symbology is quite different. So same thing here with the High Priestess, who is holding the Torah, who's the book of knowledge. She's sitting between these two pillars that we saw on the tree. And again, she is bringing the image, the knowledge, but is not yet put into words. It's an oral tradition. On the left side, we see in the Thoth deck, her Hebrew name being Gimel, which is camel, because she's the carrier of life. And we can see that she is the veiled one. The High Priestess is veiled. She's not quite manifest. She is the knowledge that is hidden. And this is the final destination. This is the Anima Mundi. We'll come back to this, the universe card. All four elements are in balance because these astrological symbols of Aquarius, Scorpio, Leo, and Taurus are the four fixed signs of the zodiac. She is in this beautiful wreath, which is the shape and symbol of the soul. And she's carrying these two batons for wands in balance. And she is a feminine. And it's interesting and something to go into. I've talked about how it is the Shekinah, the Sophia manifest in matter. That's where the Fool arrives. In this card, we see the serpent path and we see the great eye. And of course, it's much more, it's a very beautiful card, but again, something to meditate on. The final universe card, including the coiled, the spiral head. So here's another way that to play with numbers and to play, because numerology also comes from the system. So we have the 3 here, which is the Empress, who's connected to Venus, and she is manifest in, she is the Sophia, the great manifest, great mother in her splendor. And here we have the Hangman, where there's a reversal, and it's also 3, because 12 is 1 and 2, which also makes a 3. And in this state, which is experienced as a kind of crucifixion, when the ego sense of self begins to break down and we're in that place of darkness where we don't know, we are often suspended as though upside down. And this reversal is very important in order to see and envision a different point of view. And again, at the world, the final destination is also a 3, because it's a 21. Throughout the cards, we see these correspondences, which access and illuminate and teach, actually, the intuition. The more we use them, the more the intuition is amplified and honed. And they're the ahas that break through. And this is just one example, the number 3, which of course is an important number. So here we're coming back to Mercurius. This is an image, beautiful image by Geoffrey Boschart, who's also done some extraordinary images of alchemy and the astrological cards. So we see here, again, you can vaguely see the divine child at the very top above his head, and he as Mercurius, Hermes, as the mediator between spirit and matter. And so therefore he is Psyche. He's wearing the wings, and he's bridging spirit and matter. Above his head, at the very, very top here, we can see what they call the Ein Sof in Hebrew, which is the limitless light that is even beyond this first light. That is the beginning of bringing us into matter. So this is just a little more on it, that originally a wind god. The wind is very important because it's the bringer of spirit and is a precursor to Mercurius, god of revelation, and ultimately derived from the Egyptian thought, the father of alchemy, astrology, and magic. And a little more on the Hermetic philosophy. Philosophy is based on the Corpus Hermeticum, which is a collection of Neoplatonic, mystical, and Gnostic writings dating back to the 3rd and 4th centuries. They may be older than that. So coming to the self, Jung's interpretation of the self, which is the central yellow part that we were talking about on the tree, the golden part, the divine child, and he says the self appears. The fool is the self. It's the image of the self. And the self appears in dreams, myths, fairy tales, and the figure of what he calls the supraordinate personality, the hero, the king, the prophet. He's a symbol of totality. And as we can see, the fool carries that within himself, because the fool's symbol is 0, which is also a symbol for wholeness and totality, and is the circle. He goes on and he speaks about this union of these 2 opposites that we've spoken of, and how the 2 opposites appear as the united duality in the form, for instance, of Tao, as the interplay of yin and yang. And of course, yin and yang is masculine and feminine, dark and light, good and evil. All of these, we learn how to dance with them so that we can transcend them and get to a new level of consciousness, which isn't either or, but transcends both and brings in something brand new. The self appears as a play of light and shadow, and although conceived as a totality and unity in which the opposites are united and transcended. So I love that he refers to it as a play, because that is what we're doing. We don't have the answers. So all of this is about approaching in the spirit of play. So a little more on alchemy and individuation. Alchemy being a symbolic representation of the individuation process. Individuation, again, being the journey to becoming whole. So he says alchemy as a nature philosophy is of great consideration in the Middle Ages. It throws a bridge to the past, the gnosis, and also to the future, modern psychology, the unconscious. And he goes on to say, only by discovering alchemy have I understood that the unconscious is a process, and that the ego's rapports with the unconscious and its contents initiate an evolution, more precisely, a real metamorphosis of the psyche. So in other words, the psyche is literally like a caterpillar dissolving into the imaginal cells, and from that point becoming a butterfly. That is the process of transformation that we see in alchemy. Here we have, again, Magus.
I don't think we're able to hear that, Eva.
You're not able to hear it?
No.
Is there a way that it can be heard? Can we hear this?
I'm not sure. Hit play again for me, would you?
Should I start it from the beginning?
Sure.
Or keep going? I'll keep, okay. Can anyone put their hand up if they can see it? Or hear it, rather? No?
No. Go ahead and skip that if you don't mind.
No, not at all. Anyway, it is on available on YouTube, and it's Jung speaking about alchemy, for those of you who can't hear it. And it's only about a minute or so. Sorry we can't hear this. Okay. Nevertheless, this is a little diagram that I put together on breaking alchemy down from a very personalized viewpoint, beginning with that, the negredo, which is the blackness, the dross, the darkness of when the ego begins to break down with unconscious matter, or what the alchemists referred to, where we begin the prima materia. And from this leaden place, because this is lead, coming to gold, which is the conjunction or the third that we've been talking about. And it goes through a phase, and it's a very long phase. There are can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. It's a series that there are the medieval texts, and the Splendor Solis has some beautiful images of this process. And alchemy is actually 7 phases of transformation times 3. Interesting, because in a way it again corresponds to the 21 major arcana. But in this case, we're just going to look at the 3 and the 4th. Then the 4th is kind of the breath in between. So we begin with this blackness. Then we move as we've dissolved. This is the process of the caterpillar. Dissolves. And in the albedo phase, which is called the whitening, from the blackening, which is the negredo, the whitening, the spirit enters. And the rubedo phase, we come into matter and we are enlivened and transformed, and there is new life. And through that, we arrive at the conjunction. And now studying alchemy is much more complicated than this, of course, and this is just the first conjunction, and then there's a series of disintegrations where we finally, the purpose arriving of bringing spirit into matter. But this process is the process the alchemists were working with, trying to take the elements and turn what they call lead, what is valueless, into gold, which is something of great value. And Jung saw this process in the process of analysis. And of course, not everyone goes through analysis, but whether we do it through analysis or the journey, the coming to consciousness, the bringing light, illumination, consciousness into the unconscious, the darkness, is this process of individuation. The sacred marriage is that point where we bring these two, the tension of the opposites, together into the third, the transcendent, that transformation butterfly point where the soul becomes aligned and is an embodiment of spirit in the physical reality. So back here, we're back to the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega. And another quote by Jung: we can easily understand the central importance of the resurrection idea. Our psyche's totality reaches beyond the barrier of space and time through the progressive integration. We have a reasonable chance to make experiences of an archetypal nature, providing us with the feeling of continuity before and after our existence. Why are we here? What is the meaning? So the better we understand the archetype, the more we participate in its life, and the more we realize its eternity or timelessness. And here's a quote that I found by Moni Sadhu: man creates the link between nature and archetype. And tarot is a method of linking that collective unconscious, the archetypal realm, the collective, the objective psyche. Jung used all three of those terms. This realm of the gods with the world through the imagination, with the world of the personal ego, the body, matter, thus creating a pictorial bridge between the worlds. Again, that of the imagination. The imagination is the key bridge between the worlds. So this is the fall into matter from spirit and the journey home. I love this quote, so I had to add it. In the end, it is the journey that matters, not the end. Beautiful circle to that. And of course, T.S. Eliot: we shall not cease from exploration. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. And there is that circle, the alpha and the omega. Arriving, spirit embodied in matter in the anima mundi. And I think that's right on time. And this is my contact information. That came and went very fast if anybody needs it. And that is basically the end, and bringing the sacred into matter on the journey. And I'd like to open it up for questions, if there are any. Love to hear from you all.
Thank you, Eva. If anybody wants to ask a question, you can unmute in the bottom left-hand corner. Also, if you want to turn on your video, the video button is there as well.
So, Eva, I have a question.
Yes. And this is, and
I'm Jamie from Cruz.
Hi, Jamie.
I want to ask you a broad question based on your experience. If these pictorial images are a key route to understanding and transcendence, how do you see pictorial images racing against technology and the rest of our experience in the modern world? Do you see this being eclipsed or broadened?
That's an excellent question, Jamie. And I personally, you're asking me personally, I perceive it as being broadened. We are inundated with images through the internet, I think, in these times. I find that one of the interesting things that happened for me in putting this together, because I put quite a bit of time together, is I began, and I don't know if this is true for other people, I've always been a really avid reader. But it's become more difficult. And we talk a lot about how the internet gets in the way of concentration. But the images are a direct bridge. I mean, they're very, very like dreams. I mean, dreams are a way of working with images if we follow them. But I think at this point, I mean, when I was looking for images, even we're just inundated. They're everywhere. So I think that this is a fascinating question because I've been doing giving it a lot of thought as to how the internet is changing us. And how so in the world, it's actually creating new bridges in our thinking. And certainly images are one way that bridges and crosses culture. Does that touch on your question? Does it answer it?
Indeed, yes.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, by the way. It was a great question.
All right. Anybody else? Go ahead and unmute in the bottom left-hand corner if you want to talk.
Hello.
Hello.
My name's Lucille.
Lucille?
Yes. Did you feel compelled to go into tarot because your last name is Ryder?
That's very funny. Actually, when I began my tarot journey, it was about 35 years ago. My name wasn't Ryder yet.
Oh.
So that's a synchronicity, I guess.
I just had to ask that.
Oh, so cute. Thank you.
I'm very involved in tarot, and I love it, and I think it's very opportune time to pair it up with dream analysis.
Yeah, I
use
agree.
the images from the tarot decks.
I agree. And there are so many tarot decks appearing,
Yes.
which was not the case 30 years ago.
Exactly. I feel that society is more embracing it than they used to, the metaphysical side of life.
Yes, it seems that way. And again, the pictures seem to, I mean, they point the way, but they also inspire us. They intrigue us. And for those of us, and it sounds like you do you do a lot of work with dreams?
Yes.
And how have you seen the dream work linking up to your work with tarot?
Well, I actually still use it as an intuitive sense, in the sense of when like, for example, when I'm working with myself, my dreams, I actually choose the deck that I'm going to use, and I'm instinctively choosing the cards without looking at them, and it really answers my question.
It does. I have the same experience, and I've used it, but like yourself, I use it both ways. I'll use it as a divinatory tool, using the entire deck. And sometimes if I know that I'm in the middle of an initiation of some kind, or I need to focus on something, I will pull one card. Often it's one from the major arcana, and then just commune with it for a few days.
And the Toth deck is also my favorite.
It's an extraordinary deck, and and it's complete. It's probably one of the few decks that is really complete, because it does contain the astrological correspondences, and it's cross-cultural.
Well, thank you very much. I loved your presentation. It was wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much, Lucille. And thank you so much for your question and for being a part of it. I couldn't have done it without you.
Okay.
All right, it looks like Vic has his hand up. Vic, did you want to ask a question?
I'd like to throw some soup in here on this. Yeah, hi, Evan.
Hi. Hi, Vic.
How are you? I'm wondering about done a lot of study with the alchemical process and metaphors and imagery and symbolism, and recognizing that our world is evolving in a, sort of at a rate where none of us can keep up with it, and there's a panic almost related to that.
Exactly.
And how much, and there's no perfect answer here, so I'm just looking for an open kind of what your thoughts are right now is the old world, these are thousands of years old, some of these information, some of these metaphors, some of this imagery, and it's beautiful work. But how much of it may be transforming and changing? And do we need to ask the question of what's the metaphor of the metaphor? What is changing in our symbolism that's critical for us to truly transform and change? Your thoughts?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is yes. We have to ask all the questions right now because our whole frame of reference is shifting. I don't know that the archetypes change, but the actual way that they appear is changing dramatically right now, and we don't know. And I think it's interesting. Lucille had brought up that why there are so many decks, and people are creating more and more decks. And I think that the imagination is really not only our key, but by following the imagination, whether, including dreams. I mean, I do, dreams are the guides of my life. So, I mean, I think, in this case, this particular energy of the Hermetic, the Hermes or Mercurius, I often use that image as a guide. I see him as the mediator between the worlds, as I think so did Jung. I think that in alchemy, he is also the mediator. He is the connecting point. But that remains. I mean, I find that having some image or some rituals, ceremonies that we create in our life that open the door. But I think it's a really important time, as you said, Vic, to remain open and to continue to ask the question, who am I? Where am I? I mean, this is what, about locality. We don't even know where we are anymore. I mean, when we are on the internet, we are literally beyond time and space. We're moving in some other locale. I mean, right now, we are all sitting in a box having this communication in our separate locations. I mean, isn't that extraordinary? I mean, that's got to be changing the brain.
And the metaphors.
And the metaphors. So do you want to say a little more about what you mean about the metaphors right now?
Well, I really believe these images come from the dream world of self, whoever may be, impressed on trying to present these experiences. And some amazing work has been done with these cards, and they've sustained themselves through the millennia. Because the archetypes as humans, they truly reflect basic principles or ideals of things that we have trouble expressing in even just the general languages that we have. But I also see now is that there is an evolving that is happening so dramatically fast and so impenetrable that we need to be able to open ourselves up to archetypal transformation, not just reach to the archetypes, but to consider that fixed archetypes are actually changing themselves. And you know, let's take a specific example. The Fool. It's my favorite character. April Fool's Day is my favorite holiday, which is what we're on right now.
Happy April Fools.
Happy April Fools. The Fool is the one that knows. The Fool is the one that experiences, but not necessarily in our world today. The Fool is this strange character that doesn't know, ironically, you know, throughout the time. So I take it as an example is, how does the Fool card change in this amazing time in our lives where the world is beyond our understanding? And how can the Fool establish a foundation for understanding that takes us into an evolved humanity?
Yes, yes. And so the Fool is a metaphor in self for the great question of the self, right? I see. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. Yeah, because I can't. Yeah. So the Fool himself is transforming. One of the first cards. I don't know if I can go back to them. Let me see if I get out of this. I really. Of course, putting this together was transformational because I was taken over by these images. But the Fool on the left, and I don't even know which deck that is, I thought was really interesting because he is a juggler. He is the Joker, and the Jokers say is wild. So the self, we don't know who the self is. I agree with you fully. I think that right now we're in a place where the best we can do is to stay grounded, which I can't claim to be. And certainly this, being on the internet, having this conversation isn't grounding necessarily, but staying receptive and open and continuing to know that we really don't know. And that's the journey. Yeah.
Truly is a journey.
There's no answer to your question, is there? There was just more questions.
There's not an absolute. I think the question is actually the answer today. And as we ask more and more powerful questions, I think we're actually going to journey ourselves into a new humanity and unfix ourselves from what we think the answers are. But it's a very scary place to be.
It is a very scary place to be. And it is comforting to know that we have these archetypal images that we can hang on to, because sometimes the dreams are pretty scary too. I'm finding.
Oh yeah, very much so. And imagine when the archetypes break down, then what?
Yeah, I mean, that's rather beyond the imagination. I mean, the imagination may be the only thing we can hang on to as human beings. It's not betrayed us yet.
No, the deep creativity of self, and to hold on to that deeply, and to aspire to it and to manifest it.
Exactly. Yes, creativity. Yes.
Eva, the purpose of the tarot, or the purpose of all of Jung's, quote, journey, is not really to know, is it? Because the implication of the world in which I grew up in the 50s was that everything was designed to know, that you would go from not knowing to knowing. Are you convinced that that was never the journey?
No, that's another interesting question. Is that Vic? I think that we are here to know. It's just that our method of knowing may be different than what we imagined it was. And it may not be a scientific method or when Jung spoke of numinosity, when you have a numinous experience and the God comes through, or you have a series of synchronistic experiences, it's that beckoning of the gods. I mean, you know that you're in the stream of something. We may not know what it is, though. And yet, as human beings, how can we can't really live without meaning. And it's interesting because you bring up a very important point that knowledge is not synonymous with wisdom. And we have a great deal of knowledge that we have access to and very little wisdom at this time. And I think that's where we're needing to head in and wisdom, I think, is something that incorporates compassion with knowledge. And the Fool's Journey is one where he is constantly learning. He doesn't really know where he's going, but ultimately, the arrival, the anima mundi, the world soul, is his destination, and that is, bringing that light into matter, into nature.
All right.
Amazing question. Amazing questions. Thank you.
I believe that was Jamie. Thank you, Jamie. Anybody else want
Thank you, Jamie.
to ask a question?
Eva,
Yes.
are you the mediatrix archetype?
Yes, I think I am.
Talk of bringing it back, and what do you suggest in terms of facilitating that effort?
Could you ask the question again? I didn't catch the last part of it.
There's talk that the mediatrix has been oppressed or removed, and that we need to bring her back out into the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How do you suggest doing that?
That is quite a dilemma. It's one of the things I struggle with myself, quite frankly. So it's a great question. I find all my life, I've found a collision between those two worlds. And I struggle. And working with dreams and working with this profound material that's the tarot and the tree of life has been a great gift. And part of the way that I bring that out is by sharing it as I did today. This was very valuable to me to be able to share it with you, with all of you, and have a conversation about it. But in the world, it's definitely a challenge. For me personally, it's a challenge to stay rooted on the ground, on the earth in that way. I think we bring it out, in answer to your question, though, I think ultimately it's through creativity that we can bring it out into the world. I think the creative process and what we can create through the use of the imagination and the tools, with our hands, whether we use voice or dance or art or music, or I think that's the only way that we bridge these and bring it into the world. What do you think about that?
That sounds wonderful to me. That totally fits my experience. I've done all of that, but almost from a hidden standpoint, hiding behind the warrior.
Yeah, and the high priestess is hidden.
And if you can take this a step further, I'm Native American, and we use the animals, we use the instinctual cards. How do I integrate that?
Well, they're naturally integrated. I mean, hold on a second. Let me go back to one of these images right here. Well, when you're using the 4 directions, for instance, the native, you're basically already standing in this center. We're standing here in the center, right? We're the middle pillar. We're bridging spirit and matter. But you see, the 4 directions are right here.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that is the sphere of matter on the tree. That's why I love the tree, because it actually transcends. It incorporates all culture and transcends religion. And
good. Yeah, that's wonderful. Do you think if I got the top deck that it would tap into where I am?
The Thoth deck is wonderful because it's a complete deck. And even if you do, but you know, the Native American decks, I know that there was a Native American deck that I used to use quite a bit. I mean, would be a really nice one to overlay onto the Thoth deck.
That's a great idea.
And any deck that's 78 cards should work if it resonates for you.
Okay, thank you. And do you have any sort of coming together for us mediatrix types? Any way to?
Well, I would like to do a series on this, and that would be a conversation. And what I'd like to do is do a series online for now, and cover maybe 3 of the cards and have conversation around it, and come to it together and create a community. The Depth Psychology Alliance is a community. And it's a community that's available to us when we're in places where we can't connect physically.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. I'm gonna
Thank you so much.
Hi, Ava.
Hi.
Hi, it's Sophia.
Hi.
Hi. I have a question about the High Priestess.
Yes.
Is she hidden because she's spirit?
You know, we're looking at the tree, and for me, it's such a great place to be, a meditation place. The High Priestess, I'm going to point. Can you see my pointer? No, you probably can't because I'm not in play, right?
We can see it. Mm-hmm.
You can see it. Okay, so the High Priestess is over here. Now, what's really interesting about your question in this place is there's a sphere, which they call the invisible Sephiroth, which is the Hebrew word for sphere, called Doth.
Doth, yeah.
You're familiar with it. So the High Priestess is right here. So she carries this energy, the light, the knowledge. Now, Doth, the real name for Doth is knowledge, which I think is really interesting. But it's hidden because the sphere itself is actually behind the tree. It doesn't even show on this particular glyph that we're looking at. So she is carrying knowledge, but she doesn't have the capacity because she's a 2, and you can't, you know, she's basically, the 2 is a number of reflection, right? Back and forth. And she carries that knowledge. She is veiled, but she is not the one who brings it into manifestation. And it comes into manifestation through, we were looking at it through the Venus, through the Great Mother, through the Empress. And then again, the Empress is, of course, repeated right here, down here. I mean, this particular glyph that I put together is incomplete. I mean, I think I'm going to go back and put them all in. So, does that answer your question, or does it bring up at all?
Yeah. Just from my own understanding, Doth is like the doorway towards the 3 logos, the 3 Sephiroth on top. So I was wondering if she is spirit herself.
She is spirit, and she is the mediatrix. She's the one who carries. She's the carrier of knowledge. So she's both. She's not pure spirit, you know, because, you know, you can see the pure spirit up here, and you can see that the Fool is pure spirit. He's 0. But she is, I mean, here is the 1, the magician, and she is the 2. So she carries it. But to come into a 3 dimension, we have to have a 3 and a 4.
Yes. So she's the one that gives the knowledge to the magician, correct? Or the wisdom?
Well, let's just say they give it to each other. She's a feminine aspect. I mean, they're all the Fool. They're all masks of the Fool, right? They're all of us. We wear all the masks. So she's a medial figure. But she's not manifest. I wouldn't say she's fully manifest. I think she kind of flits in and out is the way I imagine her. But it's a good question and a good one to meditate on. I don't.
Yeah. What was the word that you used? Mediatrix?
Yeah, it was, who used that? Somebody, the mediatrix is it is the energy of the high priestess. Tony Wolfe, who was Jung's partner in a sense, coined that term for that feminine archetype. There are 4, and she is the one that embodies that ability to be able to bridge the 2 worlds.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you.
Like a seeress.
Exactly.
Like a what?
A seer who is a woman.
Oh, a seer. Okay. I thought you said
Exactly.
serious, like the star. That could make sense too.
That could make sense too. I love the way it all, it's a play. Yes.
So, another question someone is asking. So, the last card is the Anima Mundi, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
when we individuate, when we acquire that higher consciousness, she's the one that's gonna come up from Malkuth, which is Earth, going back to the to Kether.
Yes, she begins once we've arrived, of course, if this is the interesting thing about it is she is heaven on earth, so to speak. I mean, she is the pathway that brings us to earth. She's not actually the earth itself, right? She's a pathway. But this sphere, the sphere of Tiferet, which is the divine child, that of enlightenment, of individuation, is, and I think of it as the soul.
Yes.
I imagine Hermes being bridging it. And Hermes is actually, of course, up here. He's the magician. But you know what's so interesting about this is that the journey is back and forth. It's like this, and I had hoped I would mention that. So you're really a dance between the polar opposites. You're dancing up and you're dancing down. You're going as above, so below. This is the atomic level to the minuscule level, nature and spirit, back and forth. They're the same.
Right. So the Anima Mundi, once we individuate and we acquire that higher consciousness, in my understanding or my perspective is that the high priestess is, you said that she's not manifested. So would you say that the Anima Mundi is the matter that would translate back to spirit? Am I making sense?
Yes, you're making sense. Absolutely. Yes, she is embodied spirit and matter. Yes.
Wow.
She's in perfect balance, you see.
Right. And then you said something about it's a dance between the Sephiroth. So my understanding is that we go up and down, like you said, the dance. So the dance would be like our consciousness, correct? It depends whether we're unconscious in the shadow or when we're in this pure awareness. We go up and down the tree through our mind.
Yes, through our imagination. Through the imagination.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's a beautiful system. Thank you for the questions. Is there one more? I think we're at the top of the hour, so maybe we have time for one more short one. Is that right, Jeremy? Are we near the end?
We can do one more.
Yeah.
Anybody has anything? Anybody?
Well,
There we go.
I'll throw one in here. It's Vic back again. I got 1,000.
That's good. So do I.
The anima. The anima, by definition, is actually the feminine part of a man's personality, at least by definition. But I suggest that possibly that goes beyond that. But what's happening in this world, I suggest, is that there is a rise of the feminine, or the anima.
Yes.
and there is a fall of the masculine. And how do we deal with this in the conflicts of actual male and female interaction? Because it's creating war, because we don't understand what's happening. Men don't know how to support the rise of the feminine, and the feminine don't have a clue why they're rising. Any thoughts? And how do the tarot cards and how can the Fool play a role? Thanks.
Well, it's a really great question. And I think that the confusion here arises, and it comes up a lot, is that the terms, the masculine and the feminine, are confusing in themselves, because they really are yin and yang, right? So they're not really related to gender. They're energies. They're the negative and positive. You know how in California we speak about positive as positive and negative as bad, right? Well, it's the same kind of thing. You need both of those to create an electrical charge. So I think it's the same with masculine and feminine. I think masculine, and I'm a student of Marion Woodman's, and she used to repeat this so often, this point, is that the masculine is the energy of force on the tree of life, for instance. And the feminine is the energy that creates or holds form. So you have a dance between feminine and masculine energies. But in terms of how we're going to embody it in the times we live in, I think we each have to embody both. I mean, you know, women are not necessarily embodied in perfect femininity. We are as much out of balance as men. So this isn't about the gender. It's about this beautiful, and I think of it as a spiral dance. I don't have an image of it here, but if you think about the caduceus that Hermes is holding, that Mercurius holds, there's two snakes. One is masculine and one is feminine, and they're intertwining together. I think coming to balance is again, you know, coming to that balancing the masculine and the feminine and the third in something larger that's a completely different consciousness than either polarity. Does that answer your question, Vic?
In part, thank you, Eva.
Yeah.
And may the Fool rise to rise.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe. So on that note, thank you all so much. I'm not exactly, I think to bring us out, I'm going to go back to this lovely little piece by Stephen Hellers, and that on the Fool. And Jung has one as well, where he talks about the philosopher's stone and the stone that he created outside his own house. And he speaks about being the child and the old man. So again, the meditation on the Fool is I recognize myself as an essence without form, without qualities and limitations. I am all in all. I am no thing, but I am present in all things. I am the terminal of all and the first ordination of beginning. I was and was not. I am and am not. I shall be, yet I am utterly without a future. I am circle with its center everywhere and its circumference nowhere. Childlike and ancient, young and old, new and aged. I am I. I am. I am all and the not. I am free. So I am and was and shall be, without being and in non-being, within time and out of time, ever and never. Amen. Thank you all so much for being here and for sharing this with me this time. So appreciated. And thank you, Jeremy, for holding the feminine container and magician's tools.
Very welcome.
So thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.